Hard work alone will never make you rich. If it did, every man digging ditches and every woman laboring long hours would be wealthy beyond measure. But they're not. Why? Because wealth doesn't come from effort alone. It comes from direction. And most people never stop to realize this. They confuse busyness with progress, and they mistake labor for achievement. Let's set the record straight. In this video, I want to show you why hard work alone will never make you rich and what will. You'll learn the hidden difference between labor and achievement, between effort and progress. You'll see why some people work tirelessly all their lives and end up broke, while others, working no harder, end up free, independent, and fulfilled. Most of all, you'll discover how to direct your own efforts so that they produce not only income but wealth, not only labor but freedom. If you've ever wondered why you've worked so hard and still feel chained, this will give you the answer and the key to change it. Most people were raised to believe that work itself is the answer. They were told, keep your head down, work hard, and one day it will all pay off. And yet, look around. Millions of men and women are working harder than ever, but the majority are still struggling, still dependent, still broke by the time they reach the end of their lives. Why? Because no one ever taught them the difference between working and working towards something. They confused movement with direction. They confused labor with wealth. And so they gave their years to effort without understanding that effort without purpose is just motion in a circle. What I want to share with you today will cut through that illusion, and once you see it, you'll never look at work the same way again. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to uncover the truth about wealth and work. First, we'll look at why hard work by itself fails and why effort without thought leads to frustration. Then we'll examine the role of purpose, how setting a clear, worthy ideal turns ordinary work into extraordinary results. Next, we'll talk about ideas and imagination, the real engines of wealth. After that, we'll see how attitude and persistence transform labor into success. And finally, I'll give you practical steps you can take to direct your own work so that it builds not just a living but a life of abundance. Along the way, I'll share stories, examples, and truths that may feel surprising at first, but once you grasp them, you'll see why hard work alone has never been enough, and what you must add to it to break free. Here's something most people completely miss. The problem is not that they don't work hard enough. The problem is that they work without direction. They confuse activity with progress, motion with achievement. They rise early, stay late, exhaust themselves day after day, yet their lives never truly advance. Why? Because hard work without a clear purpose is like rowing a boat in circles. A lot of sweat, a lot of strain, but no real movement toward a destination. Think about it this way. Imagine a ship leaving the harbor. One ship has a captain at the helm, a charted course, and a definite destination. 9,999 times out of 10,000, it will reach its port. The other ship has no captain, no crew, no chart, no goal. It simply drifts with the tide. If it makes it out of the harbor at all, it will eventually end up wrecked, stranded, or lost. That's the picture of most lives. It isn't that people aren't working, it's that they're working without a chart, without a captain, without a goal. Now, why does this matter? Because work without direction never compounds into anything meaningful. It pays a wage, perhaps, but it doesn't build wealth. It fills time, but it doesn't build freedom. It may keep a man busy for 40 years, but it leaves him broke at 65. You can see this truth in the study I've often shared. Take 100 men all starting out at 25, all believing they'll be successful. By 65, only 5 will have achieved it. 1 will be rich, 4 will be financially independent, the other 95 will be dependent or broke. And yet every one of them worked. Every one of them labored. They rose in the morning, they put in their hours, they did their jobs, but they never set a course, so their hard work never carried them to the freedom they once dreamed of. What's the difference then? The difference is direction. Work tied to a definite purpose is like fuel in an engine. It drives you forward. Work without purpose is like fuel spilled on the ground, wasted, evaporated, leaving nothing behind. Farmers labor in their fields, miners dig in the earth, men and women in offices shuffle papers and attend meetings. They work, yes. But unless that work is tied to a goal of their own choosing, they will find that at the end of all that effort, nothing has really changed. So how do you correct this? You must begin by refusing to let your work be random. You must decide what you want, where you're going, what the goal of your labor is. Then every hour of effort becomes meaningful, because it is tied to something larger. The same 8 hours, the same energy, the same work, but now, instead of drifting, you're advancing. You're building, you're compounding, you're turning sweat into progress. Without that, you're only moving in circles. With it, you're moving toward wealth and freedom. That's the real reason hard work alone will never make you rich. It isn't that work doesn't matter, it's that without direction, it doesn't matter enough. What I'm about to share might seem counterintuitive at first, but if you stop and reflect, you'll see it everywhere around you. People confuse being busy with being productive. They imagine that because they're tired at the end of the day, because they've checked off a long list of tasks, because their schedule is filled from morning to night, they must be making progress. But tiredness is not proof of advancement. Busyness is not the same as achievement. A man can run on a treadmill for hours and never move an inch, and that's exactly how many people live their lives running, sweating, straining, but remaining in the same place year after year. Think of the hamster wheel. The animal runs with all its strength, faster and faster, and from a distance it looks impressive. But at the end of the effort, it is still exactly where it started. Most people live on a wheel of their own making. They wake early, they rush, they hurry. They keep themselves occupied from dawn until dusk, but they never pause to ask, occupied with what? Moving toward what? And because they never stop to ask, they mistake motion for progress, and they spend decades confusing the one for the other. This illusion of busyness is dangerous because it robs a person twice. First, it takes his time and his energy, his very life itself, and spends it on trivialities. And second, it gives him the false sense that he is moving forward, so he never questions his path. That's why you can walk into factories, offices, and fields and see men and women who have been working for 20, 30, 40 years, and yet they are no closer to freedom than when they began. They are tired, but they are not free. They are busy, but they are not rich. They are moving, but they are not advancing. Now, why does this matter so much? Because life is short. The years pass quickly. And if we give them to busyness, if we pour our sweat and strain into endless motion without direction, we wake up at 65 and find that we have been cheated not by life but by ourselves. That is the tragedy I've seen repeated again and again. Men who have worked faithfully all their lives, only to discover at the end that they have nothing to show for it but exhaustion. They confused effort with effectiveness. They believed the lie that hard work alone was enough, and it never was. So how do we break free from this illusion? By measuring our work not by how tired it makes us, but by how much it moves us toward a worthy goal. A short day spent advancing toward a dream is worth more than a lifetime of frantic activity that leads nowhere. The farmer who works long hours may remain poor if he plants the wrong crop, while the man who plants wisely and tends carefully may prosper with less labor. The secret is not in the hours themselves, but in the direction of the hours. Once you understand that, you begin to see through the illusion of busyness. You stop asking, "How hard am I working?" and begin asking, "How wisely am I working? How directly am I moving toward what I want?" That's the difference between the 95 who fail and the 5 who succeed. Both groups work. Both groups put in hours. But one works with thought, with purpose, with direction, while the other only works. And that difference explains why hard work alone has never been enough, and why it never will be. Here's something most people never stop to consider. The reason hard work so often fails is not because effort is wrong, but because it is aimless. The moment you give your work a target, the entire picture changes. Success, I have said many times, is nothing more than the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. Let that sink in, not the possession of riches, not luck, not talent, not even the accumulation of things, but the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. That means the man who knows where he is going and moves deliberately in that direction is a success right now, even before he arrives. The school teacher who teaches because she deliberately chose that path, the mother who devotes herself to raising children because that is what she most wanted, the salesman who sets out to become the finest in his field because that is his worthy goal. Each of these is already living successfully, because each is living on purpose. Think of the contrast. Picture an archer standing in a field. One has a target clearly set, and every arrow he looses, whether it strikes the bull's eye or not, moves him closer to mastery. Another archer fires into the empty sky. He may shoot all day, he may grow tired, he may fill the air with arrows, but without a target, what has he achieved? Nothing. The difference is not in the effort. It is in the presence or absence of a goal, and yet this is how most people work. They shoot into the air, they labor without a target, they fill their days with arrows of effort, and then they wonder why their lives yield nothing more than fatigue. Now, why does this matter so much? Because a worthy ideal transforms everything. It gives meaning to even the smallest task. A man digging a ditch may see it as drudgery if it is done without purpose, but the same man, digging to lay the foundation of his own home, labors with joy. Purpose is the difference. It is what turns toil into triumph, repetition into progress, exhaustion into achievement. And this is why only those who deliberately choose their goals, who define for themselves what they want most, ever rise above the mass of conformity. Most men never do this. They drift into jobs, they stumble into habits, they accept whatever life seems to hand them, and they call it fate. But it isn't fate, it's a failure to decide. A man cannot live greatly until he has chosen greatly, and choosing greatly means defining a worthy ideal, not a vague wish, not a passing desire, not what others expect, but something that stirs the heart and directs the mind. Once that is chosen, hard work ceases to be meaningless labor and becomes instead the steady march toward a desired destiny. So how do you begin? You begin by asking yourself honestly, what do I most want? What ideal is worthy? Out of the years and energy of my life? And then you write it down. Make it specific. Make it definite. Carry it with you. Hold it before your mind every day. For the truth is simple. Without a goal, you will work hard and end poor. With a goal, even ordinary work becomes extraordinary, because it is moving you toward the life you have chosen. That is the power of defining a worthy ideal. It is the first step out of the chains of meaningless labor and the first step into the freedom of deliberate living. What I want you to see now is how purpose changes the very nature of work itself. Without purpose, effort evaporates. The years slip by, the energy is spent, and at the end there is nothing to show for it but fatigue. But when a man ties his labor to a goal of his own choosing, something remarkable happens. His work begins to compound. Each day builds upon the last. Each step, no matter how small, carries him closer to a destination. Suddenly, work is no longer an endless cycle. It becomes a progression. And the difference between evaporation and compounding is the difference between poverty and wealth, between disappointment and fulfillment. Let me illustrate. I once told the story of a successful lawyer who, by every outward sign, had achieved what he wanted. He had a fine home, a respected practice, a good income, a wife and family, and yet, in the middle of what others would call success, he confessed to me that he felt empty, restless, unhappy. Why? Because he had stopped setting goals. He had reached the destination he had once chosen, but he failed to chart a new one. Without a fresh purpose, his work lost its meaning. Each day became routine, each case another repetition, each hour of labor nothing more than motion without growth. He had climbed his ladder, only to find it leaning against the wrong wall, or worse, no wall at all. This is the fate of countless men and women. They work hard, they climb, they strive, and at the end they discover that their labor has carried them nowhere they truly wanted to be. And yet, this fate is not inevitable. The man who ties his work to a worthy goal never suffers this disappointment, because each step is progress by definition. Even before he arrives, he is successful, because success is the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. His ladder is leaning against the right wall, and each rung he climbs gives him satisfaction. Now, why does this matter so much? Because life is not measured in years, but in progress. A single year spent advancing toward a goal is worth more than a decade spent drifting. The world does not reward effort alone, it rewards directed effort. The soil does not yield crops simply because a man sweats over it, it yields because he planted the right seeds. In the same way, your work will not reward you simply because you labor. It will reward you only when that labor is tied to purpose, when each action compounds into growth. So, how do you ensure your work turns into progress? You never stop setting goals. The moment you achieve one, you set another. The moment you reach a destination, you chart a new course. This is not restlessness, it is growth. It is the way life itself is designed. The tree never stops reaching for the sun, the river never stops moving toward the sea, and the human being was not designed to stagnate. The moment we stop moving forward, we begin to decay. But when we set new goals, when we keep before us a vision of the life we want to live, our work gains meaning, our effort compounds, and progress becomes inevitable. That is why work without purpose leads to exhaustion, but work with purpose leads to wealth. It is the difference between a man climbing a ladder leaned against nothing and a man steadily ascending toward the vision he has deliberately chosen. One ends in disappointment, the other in fulfillment. And the choice, always, is ours. Here's the next truth that so few ever recognize. Wealth is not created by sweat alone. If it were, the hardest working men and women in the world would be the richest. But look around and you'll see that it simply isn't so. A mule can labor all day, carrying heavy loads, straining every muscle, and yet it will never become wealthy. Why? Because wealth does not flow from brute effort, it flows from thought. It flows from imagination. It flows from ideas. And this is where the human being has an advantage no other creature possesses. The power to think, to create, to imagine, and then to translate that imagination into reality. Now, why is this so important? Because once you see that wealth comes from ideas, you understand why some men, working no harder than their neighbors, end up prosperous and free, while others, working longer hours, end up tired and broke. The difference is not in their strength or even their diligence, but in the way they use their minds. One man tills his soil endlessly, producing only enough to get by. Another man looks at the same soil and asks, "What can I do differently? How can I improve? How can I serve better?" And from that question springs an idea that multiplies his results 100-fold. It is not the hours that separate them, it is the thought behind the hours. Consider the story of Russell Conwell's famous Acres of Diamonds. A farmer, enchanted by tales of wealth in distant lands, sold his farm and spent the rest of his life searching for riches. He never found them, and he died poor and defeated. Yet the man who bought that same farm discovered it was sitting on one of the richest diamond mines on the continent. What is the lesson? That wealth is often hidden in plain sight, waiting to be uncovered by the man with the eyes to see it. Ideas are the eyes. Without them, you can stand on treasure and never know it. With them, you can take the same soil, the same hours, the same circumstances, and turn them into gold. This principle explains why some of the greatest fortunes have been built not by those who labored the hardest, but by those who thought the hardest. The Wright brothers imagined a flying machine. Thomas Edison imagined light in the darkness. Andrew Carnegie imagined steel cities rising to the sky. Henry Ford imagined a motor car for the common man. None of these men were strangers to work, but what set them apart was that their work was guided and multiplied by ideas. The man who can harness his imagination is like the farmer who plants a single seed and reaps 100-fold harvest. The man who labors without thought is like the farmer who throws seed on barren ground and wonders why nothing grows. Now, why do most people miss this? Because they've been trained to value labor more than thought. From childhood, they're told, "Work hard, keep busy, stay at it." Rarely are they told, "Think deeply, imagine boldly, plan carefully." And yet, as Napoleon Hill once said, "An idea is the beginning of all fortunes." The truth is, your mind is your richest resource. It is the last unexplored frontier, more powerful than any muscle, more valuable than any tool. The world will always pay generously for a man who brings ideas that solve problems, who improves the way things are done, who imagines a better way and then makes it real. So, how do you begin to harness this power? You start by giving yourself time to think. Most people fill their days with noise, rushing from task to task, never pausing to reflect, never asking, "How could this be done better? What new value could I create?" Take time each day to sit quietly with a pencil and paper and let your mind roam. Ask questions, seek improvements, look for ways to serve. The soil of your mind will always yield something if you tend it. At first the ideas may seem small, but small ideas lead to larger ones, and larger ones lead to transformation. The difference between the man who remains in poverty and the man who rises to wealth is not in the hours they work, but in the ideas they bring to those hours. One man lets his mind idle, repeating yesterday's routines, and he gets yesterday's results. Another man trains his mind to create, to question, to imagine, and he turns the same hours into opportunity. That is the true power of ideas. They are the multiplier of effort, the force that turns labor into wealth, and the secret that proves once and for all that hard work alone will never make you rich. Now let's look at the final element that separates those who turn their work into wealth from those who remain chained to labor. It is attitude, joined with persistence. A man can have the finest goal in the world, he can work with purpose, he can even stumble upon a remarkable idea, but if his attitude is poor, or if he quits at the first sign of difficulty, all of it will amount to nothing. Attitude is the lens through which we see life. Persistence is the strength that carries us through it. Together they form the spirit of success. Without them, even brilliance falters. With them, even ordinary effort becomes extraordinary. You see, your attitude is nothing less than your broadcast to the world. It is the message you send, silently but unmistakably, to everyone you meet and to every circumstance you face. If it is one of expectancy and cheerfulness, the world reflects that back. If it is one of doubt, bitterness, or resentment, the world reflects that too. I once told the story of a woman who moved to Florida with her husband, eager to begin a new chapter. Within months, she was miserable. "No one here is friendly," she complained. "No one welcomes me." But the truth was, her own attitude had built the wall. She stayed inside, waiting for others to make the first move, and when they didn't, she judged them cold. In reality, they were simply mirroring her. The world is like a mirror. It reflects what we show it. Change your attitude, and the reflection changes too. Now, why is this so crucial to breaking the chains of empty labor? Because the moment you set a goal and begin pursuing it, obstacles will appear. There will be setbacks. There will be delays. There will be critics. There will be days when everything seems to move against you, and in those moments it is your attitude that determines whether you rise or fall. A poor attitude magnifies obstacles, turning small challenges into insurmountable walls. A strong attitude shrinks them, seeing them as stepping stones, as lessons, as opportunities in disguise. Two men may face the same hardship. One collapses, the other grows stronger. The difference is not in the hardship, but in the spirit with which it is faced. But attitude alone is not enough. It must be joined with persistence, the refusal to quit. Because the truth is, most people stop too soon. They give up just before the reward, just before the breakthrough. They allow discouragement to steal what perseverance would have won. Success belongs not to the man who begins with enthusiasm, but to the man who endures with determination. The soil does not yield a harvest the moment you plant the seed. It requires patience, care, and time, and so does life. To expect immediate results is to misunderstand the very law of growth. To persist through the season of waiting is to align yourself with that law. Think again of the parable of acres of diamonds. The farmer who sold his land believed the treasure must lie elsewhere, that his own soil held nothing. He gave up too soon. Had he persisted with expectancy, had he continued to work his own field with a better attitude, he would have discovered the diamonds beneath his feet. And this is where most men fail. They abandon the field too quickly. They give up the search too early. They quit just before the discovery. Persistence, joined with the right attitude, is the quality that prevents this tragedy. It is the quality that ensures your hard work, your purpose, and your ideas are carried through to completion. So, how do you cultivate this spirit? You begin each day by setting your attitude deliberately. Do not leave it to chance. Wake with gratitude, look forward with expectancy, and decide in advance that no setback will turn you back. Then persist. Work steadily, day by day, step by step, even when the results are invisible. Trust the process, as the farmer trusts the season. Remember that success is not an event but a direction, not a sudden gift but a gradual unfolding, and if you hold your course with cheerfulness and determination, you will arrive. This is why attitude and persistence are indispensable. They turn defeats into lessons, delays into preparation, and obstacles into opportunities. They ensure that your ideas are not wasted, your goals are not abandoned, and your work is not in vain. And once you have them, you will find that nothing in this world can hold you back. Now let us bring all of this together, because knowing that hard work alone will never make you rich is only the first step. We must then ask, how do we direct our work so that it produces not merely a paycheck but a life of abundance and freedom? The answer lies in combining all that we have spoken of: clear goals, worthy ideals, ideas, attitude, and persistence into a pattern you can follow each day. It is not complicated, but it is rare, because most people will not take the time to think, to plan, to direct their lives. They leave their work to chance, and so their lives become the result of chance. But you need not live that way. You can take the same hours, the same labor, and by directing it, you can change its result entirely. First, you must begin with a goal. This cannot be overemphasized. Without a goal, work is wasted energy, but with a goal, every task becomes part of a greater whole. Think of the salesman who simply goes through the motions each day, knocking on doors, making calls, repeating routines. At the end of the year, he earns a modest income, just enough to get by. Now, picture another salesman working the same hours, making the same number of calls, but with one difference: he has set a definite goal. He has decided to become the top in his company, to build lasting relationships with his clients, to multiply his results. Each call he makes, each conversation he has, carries him toward that vision. The same work, but one man drifts while the other advances. That is the power of direction. Second, align your work with service. This is where most people fail. They think wealth is earned by taking, by hoarding, by holding on. The truth is the opposite. Wealth is earned by giving, by serving, by bringing value to others. The man who spends his life asking, "What can I get?" will always struggle. The man who asks, "How can I serve more effectively? How can I meet more needs? How can I improve the lives of others?" will always prosper, because the world pays generously for service. Every fortune ever built was built on this foundation. Someone found a way to serve others better, and the wealth flowed as a natural result. Third, guard your attitude. This is not something to be left to mood or chance. Each morning, set it deliberately, as a sailor sets the sails. Begin the day with gratitude for what you already have, and with expectancy for what lies ahead. Remember that life is a mirror. It reflects what you show it. If you expect the worst, the world will oblige. If you expect the best, the world will reflect it back. And in those moments when discouragement comes, as it surely will, remind yourself that setbacks are not signals to quit but opportunities to grow stronger. Your attitude is the soil in which your work is planted. If it is rich and healthy, your efforts will flourish. If it is poor and neglected, even the best seeds will struggle. Finally, persist. This may be the simplest instruction of all, and yet it is the hardest to live. Most men quit too soon. They grow impatient. They plant the seed and then dig it up to see if it is growing. They forget that every worthwhile harvest requires time. Do not make that mistake. Once you have chosen your goal, once you have aligned your work with service, once you have set your attitude, hold steady, persist day after day, even when the results are invisible. Trust the process, and in time, the results will appear. This is why I have often recommended the 30-day test. For 30 days, choose a single goal, write it down, carry it with you. Think about it every day. Refuse to allow negative thoughts to take root. When they appear, replace them immediately with a vision of your goal. Direct all your work toward it, no matter how small the task. At the end of 30 days, you will notice a change. Your mind will be sharper, your attitude will be stronger, your work will feel purposeful. And most important of all, you will have proven to yourself that success is not the product of chance, but of deliberate direction. So here is the truth, plain and simple. Work itself is neutral. It can enslave you, or it can free you. It can leave you broke, or it can make you rich. The difference is in how you direct it. Tie it to a goal, align it with service, guard it with a great attitude, fuel it with persistence, and your work will build wealth and freedom. Leave it aimless, and it will leave you weary and disappointed. The choice is yours. And once you see that, you realize that you already hold the key. So now we have come to the end of our time together, and I want to bring these truths into sharp focus. We began with the question, why is it that hard work, by itself, so rarely leads to wealth? And we discovered the answer because effort without direction is only motion, because busyness is not the same as achievement, because labor without a worthy ideal evaporates into fatigue, because wealth is created by ideas as much as by hands, and because only attitude and persistence can carry those ideas through to completion. That is why so many men and women give the best years of their lives to labor and end up poor, while a smaller number, often working no harder, end up free. The difference is not in the hours, but in the way those hours are directed. And now I want you to see the great freedom in this. You are not chained by your work. You are not doomed by the hours you must give each day. What matters is how you direct them. Two men may each rise at dawn and labor until dusk. One ends his life weary and dependent, the other ends his life wealthy and free. The difference is invisible to the eye, but decisive in its result. It lies in the thoughts they hold, the goals they set, the attitude they bring, and the persistence they practice. Hard work is necessary, but it is not sufficient. To be rich in the truest sense, you must bring your mind, your imagination, your vision, and your will to your work. So, here is my challenge to you. For the next 30 days, take one definite goal, not 10, not 5, but one, and make it the center of your thoughts. Write it down, carry it with you. Think about it morning, noon, and night. Direct every hour of your labor toward it. Refuse to allow negative thoughts to take root. When they come, replace them immediately with the image of your goal already achieved. Do this faithfully, and you will begin to notice the change. At first, it will be within you a new sense of purpose, a clarity of direction, a fresh energy for the day. Then it will begin to show itself in the world around you, new ideas, new opportunities, new results. And before long, you will have proven to yourself what few ever discover, that wealth is not a matter of chance, but of choice, not a product of hard work alone, but of directed thought applied to steady labor. Remember this simple affirmation. We become what we think about. Not what we simply toil at, not what we wish for, but what we deliberately hold in mind and move toward. That is the law that has never failed. If you think only of labor, you will have only labor. If you think of freedom, of service, of a worthy ideal, and then direct your work toward it, you will live in freedom. The choice has always been yours. And as you take this step, I want to leave you with a thought that leads into our next journey together. Because even once you understand that work must be tied to purpose, ideas, attitude, and persistence, there remains a hidden law of success, one that multiplies all these principles, one that few ever hear, and yet it is the very principle that separates ordinary lives from extraordinary ones. In our next time together, I want to show you this hidden law. It may be the most important discovery you will ever make. So join me there, and let us continue this journey into the boundless possibilities of your own mind.